Greetings, my friends. How are we doing today? Now, I was sent the following comment that was left on one of my recent videos. I'm guessing English is not this person's first language, so we'll forgive the spelling and punctuation. The individual never has and never will exist. You all built your so-called individuality by observing various herds and their ideas, but were too weak to commit to any of them. We are but one universal collective unconscious, acting the same throughout history. One herd exterminating another weaker herd is not evil but progression. The other herd would do the same if the roles were reversed. Furthermore, there is no right or wrong. Nothing is evil or good. Well, my friends, let's dissect this comment, shall we? Even though I found it difficult to read, this person makes some good points, I have to admit. But to begin with, I don't agree with the first part. Individuality can be obtained. Yes, we're all part of or connected to the collective unconscious, which can't be denied, but some can achieve individuality within that greater collective structure. Get what I'm saying? Obtaining the individuality of the soul or psyche is what the left-hand path is all about. It is the defining aspect of self-deification, that supreme form of psychic autonomy predicated upon one's self-knowledge brought forth by heretical techniques. To put it simply, it's swimming upstream, not out of childish disobedience, but out of real conscious awareness in order to attain that stability of mind separate from the collective whole. It is the awareness that one's venturing beyond the cultural confines and conditionings to seek something higher or lower, if you will, lower into the depths of the dark absolute, in order to commune with that which lurks within the primal chaos, to maybe even touch the scales of Leviathan if you dare, to go so far into the darkness you come into the light. Now, the collective unconscious is always there and has been there since our earliest ancestors became conscious. But we who abide by a heterodoxical, esoteric perspective are fully aware of its influences and are able to manipulate and bend those influences to our will. While those on the right-hand path would simply go with the flow, allowing the avatars of the collective unconscious, the gods and monsters, angels and demons, to control and manipulate them. Their world is the herd, and the herd is all of existence. That's all they can see. It's the only thing in their perception of reality. So the idea of departing from the herd is nonsensical. To them, it would be like saying one could simply propel themselves into the vacuum of space just through sheer will of thought. This reminds me of when an individual a while back argued online that there was no such thing as the right and left-hand paths. That the idea of separate paths was bullshit, and if you believe this, it proves you're a neophyte. Only someone who's never stepped off the right-hand path would say that, because we who have been on both paths know there's a difference. This is just a babbling of one with a myopic perspective. Now we come to the second part of the comment and to the statement. One herd exterminating another weaker herd. That other herd would do the same if the roles were reversed. This I agree with. This is very true, without a doubt. The human animal is a vicious creature, the most vicious, one who will slaughter their fellow human being for the most ridiculous reasons or for no reasons at all. And it is the species, not any particular race within the species, but the species itself as a whole that is so savagely brutal. I'm talking all kinds of people. Yes, the Europeans have been brutal throughout history, from the Roman Empire to the Vikings to the British Empire to the Nazis and so on. But the Europeans are no worse than any others who have exploited their authority. Let's take the Mongols, for example. The Mongol Empire of the 13th and 14th centuries had the largest continuous land empire in history, conquering most of Asia and even parts of Eastern Europe. One of their many massacres was so horrific that even months after the event, a passing eyewitness wrote that the bones of the slaughtered formed white mountains and the soil was still greasy with human fat. And what about the Japanese, for example? I think we're aware of the atrocities of World War II, but what about just before World War II? Ever heard of the rape of Nanking? During the Sino-Japanese War, Nanking, the then capital of China, fell to the Japanese, and to break the spirit of the Chinese resistance, the Japanese authority ordered that the city of Nanking be destroyed. Most of the city was burned to the ground, and Japanese troops launched a campaign of atrocities against the civilians. They started off by butchering an estimated 150,000 male war prisoners, massacred an additional 50,000 male civilians, and raped at least 20,000 women and girls of all ages, many of whom were mutilated or killed in the process. They even forced family members to rape one another. And what about in Africa? There's a long history of slavery, torture, and genocide there. Take the Empire of Dahomey. You know that silly movie that came out last year called The Woman King? That empire, Dahomey, they weren't the heroes by any stretch of the imagination. They were probably the worst in their region of West Africa. For example, they would have this annual event where they would slaughter up to 500 fellow African slaves, their neighbors. And it's believed that the ancestors of 1/3 of all African Americans were enslaved and then sold to the whites by the Dahomeans. Making a movie about them being heroes would be like making a movie about the Nazi SS rescuing Jews from the Holocaust. It's that stupid. And what about the native people of the Americas, you may ask? Before the coming of the Europeans, didn't they all get along in a paradise, believing that there were 7 genders while smoking peyote and riding unicorns? Not quite. Let's take the Aztec, for example. They were the epitome of an evil empire. At the opening ceremony of one of their temples in 1487, prisoners of war were taken to the top of one of their pyramids, where the victims were then sliced open by high priests with obsidian knives, then had their hearts ripped out, which were still beating, and then raised to the spirits above and the crowd below. The lifeless bodies were then thrown down the steps until after 4 days, 4,000 prisoners were killed to satisfy their gods, and also maybe to frighten those who might challenge their authority. And here in the United States, we had the Comanches, the greatest mounted warriors in human history. Their fighting skills were so impressive, they forced the Apaches out of West Texas. And the Apaches were no pussies. The Comanche could fire 10 or more arrows at a full gallop in the same amount of time it would take a white man to load and fire his rifle or musket. This is the reason why the 6-shooter was invented. Now, there was a 5-shot pistol, but some say that extra bullet, they added that extra bullet to save it for themselves, because if they got caught, you would wish you were dead. This is because torture is what they did to any man they captured. It was an ancient custom of the natives of the Great Plains to slowly torture their adult male captives, no matter their race. One fun method was staking the victim to the ground face up and placing burning coals on their bodies until they burned right through all the way to the ground, or they skinned them alive slowly. This is just a couple of methods. Women didn't fare so well either. They were usually raped and killed, or raped and made into slaves. Babies were killed outright, chopped to pieces, or dragged behind their horses until dead. But if you were a child, maybe roughly the age between 6 and 12, there was a good chance you could be adopted into the tribe. Look up the tale of Cynthia Ann Parker, the mother of the great Comanche chief Quanah Parker. This is a fascinating story. So yeah, the commenter was right about the herds exterminating one another. It's an innate tribal survival instinct in the human animal. And we come to the last part of this person's comment, which is, furthermore, there is no right or wrong. Nothing is evil or good. This person is correct. Good and evil are relative. Like with the Comanches, what they did in their eyes wasn't evil, but necessary for the survival of the tribe. You couldn't have a motherless baby around when you were a people always on the go, always moving. Or if the mother was there, she was a slave and she couldn't do her work and tend to a baby at the same time. And by torturing the adult males, they were conveying a very simple message, and that was, don't fuck with us. Another good example of this idea of good and evil being relative would be everyone's favorite impaler, Vlad III of Romania, or Vlad Dracula. To his enemies, he was a monster, but to the Romanians, he's a folk hero who utilized brutal means to protect his principality from the Ottoman Empire. On a side note, many Romanians aren't too crazy about the fact that Bram Stoker turned a national hero into a vampire. One time, a Romanian citizen said to an American reporter, "How would you feel if someone turned your George Washington into a werewolf?" Good point. So, in conclusion, the world is an ugly fucking place filled with violence and hardship. But never forget, Nietzsche's amor fati, love of fate. You are alive, your heart beats, and by utilizing your will that is strengthened by this path, you can not only gaze into the abyss and not divert your eyes, but smile while doing so. Until next time.